Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial video for Divinity Original Sin, the board game. The rulebook isn't quite ready to share yet, but we know that a lot of you are very eager to see how the game plays and just understand the nuances of the mechanics. So this short video should be just to help demonstrate how to play, and that'll give you a good idea of how the mechanics roll and what you can expect throughout your adventure. So basically what we've got in front of us here is actually Torture Chamber, which is our very first location. You're going to see a lot of tutorial text here, which is essentially because these two locations that we're going to demonstrate today, Torture Chamber and the Lower Hold, are both tutorial locations. We're going to act like we've just finished the Torture Chamber, and we're going to move on to the Lower Hold. And when we turn to the Lower Hold, we then go to the location deck. In this case, I have 3 locations in this deck. That's the tutorial location, and then we have the Lower Hold. So I take the entire Lower Hold, I set that aside, and we're now ready to play the Lower Hold. We'll read the instructions, which are over here, which is setup. In this case, all we have to do is take out the deck, which we've already done, and we place all our characters in the storage room, which is number 1 on the board. That's where we're starting. We're starting in the storage room of the Lower Hold. Finally, we set the location timer to 10, so I'm going to move our little location timer token up to number 10, and that's all the instructions for setup. The game itself splits into 2 different types of turns, essentially. You have exploration turns and you have combat turns. And that's all done on this reference card here. So you'll see that we have an exploration side on this side and a combat side on this side. Exploration is very simple. On your turn, adjacency, movement doesn't really matter. The only time that adjacency matters is when you have these kind of locked paths here, as you can see. It has a key symbol. Iconography is still a work in progress. We're going to be finishing that in the next week or 2, but you can see that the path here is locked, so we cannot pass that. And as you continue through your adventure, there will be certain rules that will be important for that location that are going to be put in this special rules box here. So if you need to remember something, very often we're going to remind you in the special rules box, so you don't need to go digging into the rule book necessarily to remember how to play. So in this case, we know this area is locked. But in general, exploration, I can go anywhere as long as there's artwork on the card and there's not a locked path to block it. On your turn, you can either explore, which is to go to a location and draw its card. So for instance, I could go to, I'll go to the interrogation and I'll go to storage room with Tanguisto. The players can split up or they can stick together. No matter what though, you're always drawing 1 card for a location, even if 2 people are in there at the same time. So what does it mean when we explore? Basically, we do, as we can see here, we can explore the storage room and we can explore the interrogation. We'll go for the storage room first to basically show what that is. We'll look at number 1 and we'll find number 1 here on the card. We'll draw it. It says, a large box here is blocking a path. A single origin here may make a challenge roll to smash the box. Challenge rolls are essentially our way of giving you challenges, these kind of skill checks for you to figure out what your character can do or can't do. Each character can be good at certain things and bad at certain things. In general, you will always roll 2 white dice to do a skill challenge, and then after that you'll gain more dice based on your warfare trait in this case, or 2-handed. I don't have either of those traits, so I'm only going to be rolling 2 dice. I would roll the dice, see how many hits I got, which is only 1, flip it over. It says 0 to 2, you smash the box, I break it open, but I clear the way. So I can place the key token, of which I currently am just using a wooden token to represent it, and that basically means now the path is open. I'm going to do the guard station just to demonstrate combat real quick. The guard station is, as I said, is a combat card. And the way combat cards work is very simple. I burst into the guards' quarters and the guards are ready with their weapons. I spawn the following enemies. In this case, it's a 2-player game, so I look at the symbols for 2 players, and I have to draw 1 Magister Sailor in number 3, and that Magister Sailor spawns in fast. So what I do is, I get myself a minion tray, I put a Magister Sailor on top, I set their health, so a Magister Sailor has 22 health, they're quite chunky boys. These are obviously prototype components, but you get the idea. 22, and that character goes in fast. Then finally, I get their little token here to indicate where they are, and I put them in 3 because he's in the guard station. Then finally, I take another Magister Sailor, set their health to 22, and I put them in slow as instructed by the card. And once again, we put that in we put E in the guard station. So now Sabile is surrounded by 2 guards and Tanguistel is chilling over here in the storage room. That is the end of our turn. And if we go back to our handy little reference card again, you'll see the end of the turn is reduced location timer. So we're going to move the location timer down. Then we resolve any location timer cards, something for later, but there are certain events that can happen, like D over here. So we're not there yet, thankfully. We're not going to have to draw the card D and see what happens. And then finally, if there's any enemies on the board, which there now are, we flip this and it becomes a combat round. So I flip the booklet and now we're in a combat round. So our next round starts. All origins will generate their AP. So your character, and we should demonstrate that now, is a collection of different cards. As you can see, Tanguistel here has, I'll put the combat card here, by the way, that's where I meant to place it. Tanguistel here has a collection of cards. She has a fire wand and thick robes. These are her 2 starting items, which are essentially her basic armor and a basic weapon. She's going to put them on her character board. She has her actual origin card, which, as you can see here, is giving her various stats. She has 7 health, 4 action points, 1 star, which I'll explain shortly. She gets 1 source every turn, which is this token here. And she starts the game with 1 talent. In this case, the talent is sidestep, which again I'll explain later. After that, she has a unique ability, which actually when I was doing my challenge roll, I should have been rolling 2 reds instead of 2 whites. But you can see here that these are our stats. What makes the origin cards a little unique is that when you level up later, you'll actually be flipping these over and the stats will increase to reflect the level that Tanguistel is at. But for the moment, we're level 1 and we're going to jump into combat as a level 1 character. Finally, one of the main things what makes up a character is the skills that you choose. In this case, you can see that Tanguistel is a Geomancer and a Pyromancer. So she has a bunch of fire spells and a bunch of earth-based spells here as well. So on my turn, coming back to my location card, or my combat card, I can generate action points. So I look at my origin card here, I have 4 action points, I generate 4 action points. I have 4 action points to spend, which I can spend on various things like my skills, like this Fossil Strike for 2 action points. Or my Fire Wand, I can just use it as a regular action for 1 action point and do an attack with that. Then finally, there are a number of kind of basic actions you can do that are on your board, as kind of demonstrated here on the player board. Then, once we've generated all our action points, we then go in turn order in the middle of the round. We first execute any fast minions. So in this case, this Magister Sailor on C is going to go because he's in the fast slot. Then we're going to go with the origins, which are our player characters. They're going to get their turn. And then finally, we will activate any slow minions and they will have their turn. As you can probably imagine, these two, a relatively straightforward fight. It's actually pretty tough for a first fight, but it gets more complicated as more minions come out and can get very difficult indeed if you allow yourself to get swarmed. The first thing we'll do with a minion is we'll look at them real briefly so you can understand and see their cards and understand what that looks like. The Magister Sailor here, very similarly addressed to the way your combat cards work, but also your character cards. The Magister Sailor has 22 health, 1 physical armor, 1 magical armor. This little symbol here I'll explain in a moment. Then you can see that he can move 3 spaces and has a range of 0, which means he must be in the same area to hit you. Finally, we can see they roll 4 white dice with a +2 modifier, and they're doing physical damage. Finally, if any minions have a special ability, it'll be listed here at the bottom of the card. So he's going to take his turn, and that little symbol, which I didn't explain earlier, is his targeting symbol. So every minion, before they take a turn, this Magister Sailor is no different, will roll the targeting die. Ignore the white die with black stickers, it will be a black die in your final version. I'll roll it now. This symbol essentially means that they're going to attack the closest person. If they roll the target symbol, they would then attack whoever is listed here specially on the card. So for instance, they would specifically target the lowest physical armor. In this case, they're attacking the closest, so they're attacking Sabile. The Magister Sailor then would take his 4 white dice, and this is where I as a player will hope that they don't roll very high, and they roll 2 blanks, which is good for me, and 2 hits. They didn't roll any special symbols, which are these little symbols here beside the hit. If you roll a special, then you'll need to follow whatever the instructions are on the minion card. But no specials this time, so thankfully just 2 damage to mitigate. It's 2 physical damage towards me. However, as you can probably tell, Sabile has got some armor herself. She's got the leather armor. And the leather armor here actually says that Sabile has 2 physical resistance. So thankfully for Sabile, she takes no damage this turn. Magister Sailor's turn is over. There are no more minions in the fast initiative slot, so we're going to go straight to the Origins. The Origins then take their turn, and because it's a player and it's a party-based game, it's a cooperative game, you will be able to decide who wants to take their turn first and who wants to go after that, and so on and so forth. The only restriction to this rule is that you must complete your turn before another player takes theirs. So we're going to go straight into it, and we're going to have Sabile take her turn. But let me explain a little bit about what her build is. She, as you can see, she has a Assassin's Dagger. Once again, you have action points here that at the top left. That's how many action points it takes to use the action. It'll indicate what range it is. It'll also indicate if it's a single or a area attack. So very often you might have spells that say area, in which case that's going to hit everybody in the zone, including your friends. So, you know, be careful who you play with. After that, it'll tell you what dice you're rolling and what type of damage you're doing. So you can see here the Assassin's Dagger only rolling 1 blue dice, but is doing physical damage. And then you can also see that if you roll a special with this weapon, it takes direct damage and they gain poisoned. Direct damage is essentially damage as what it sounds like. It ignores armor and immediately hits their health. So while the Assassin's Dagger is not very good at getting through armor, if you roll any specials at all and you're rolling a blue dice, which is usually good for specials, you'll actually do direct damage and you'll poison the enemy. So that's what she can do with her Assassin's Dagger. And then finally she has her skills. So what she has, what Sabile has here is 2 Scoundrel skills, Cloak and Dagger and Throwing Knife. And she has Tentacle Lash and Chameleon. Astute viewers might notice that she has both Cloak and Dagger and Chameleon, which are both invisibility buffs. We'll explain what buffs do shortly, but for the moment, let's use some of the more basic actions. You can see that Throwing Knife here is very, very similar to the Assassin's Dagger. The only difference to the skills is that you're going to notice a lot of the skills have this cooldown icon. And essentially what that would mean is if Tanguistel was using it for a second, she would use the Throwing Knife, spend her 2 action points, and then place it in cooldown 1, basically indicating that she won't be able to use it for the rest of the round. Later skills will actually put it in cooldown 2, 3, 4, 5, and you might not have it again until the next fight, depending on how long the cooldown is and how long the fight lasts. So in this case, that's what this would normally do. And then as you can see here, if her character is invisible, she'll actually be able to use blue dice instead of white dice for her attack, which is really good because as you can see, she adds +3 hits for every special she rolls. The white dice, the blue dice, and the red dice are obviously different in this game. The white dice are kind of your basic dice. They have some hits and they have 1 special. The red dice have a lot of hits, but have no increase in specials, so they're really just for baseline damage. And then the blue dice have increased amounts of special. So in this case, given that Throwing Knife does extra damage for hitting specials, and it gives you blue dice if you go invisible, the obvious choice is to possibly try get yourself invisible before you roll your dice. You're more likely to hit those specials and more likely to do extreme damage. So that's what we're going to do. Sabile here gains her 4 action points every turn, which I didn't give Sabile. She will then use her Cloak and Dagger ability. She'll put that in cooldown 4, face up. She'll spend 1 action point to do so. And then she's going to essentially move 1 away because it allows her to move to an adjacent area. She's going to move over to the storage room next to Tanguistel so they can gather in numbers. And then for her second ability, she's going to use Throwing Knife. Throwing Knife essentially costs 2 action points. I'll spend those 2 action points. It has a cooldown of 1, so I'll put it in cooldown 1. And I'm invisible, so I'm going to be rolling blue dice instead of white dice because that's what the special ability of the card is. Secondly, because I attacked, I must now flip over Cloak and Dagger. I'm no longer invisible. I roll my 2 blue dice. Oh, it's 3 blue dice. I roll my 3 blue dice. And I've got a lot of specials, which is wonderful news. I promised I'd go back to the star bonus, so let's talk about that now. When a skill has +* it means basically that you add the amount of stars that you have on your origin card. As you can see from our base origin cards, everyone has 1 star, but as I level up, I'll gain more. So essentially by level 6, I believe we have 4 stars. The reason for that is to allow your level 1 skills to scale as you do. So as you level up, throwing knives, damage, and utility and usefulness doesn't die off at the late game. If anything, it grows with you. So that's the purpose of the stars. So in this case, I've rolled my blue dice. Unfortunately, didn't roll wonderful. I get 2 specials though, which is great, plus 1 hit, plus another hit for my star. The 2 specials in this case give plus 3 hits each. So 2 specials is 6, plus 1 for my star is an 8 total damage, and it's physical damage, which is honestly a really good roll for my first roll in this demonstration. 8 damage against this Magister Sailor, against his physical armor, is against his 1 physical armor, which means 7 damage. So we'll deduct his health by 7, bringing him down to 15. As you can see, Sabine essentially only has 1 action point remaining. She has 2 skills and cooldown. And if I wanted to, I could attack with my Assassin's Dagger, but I'm no longer in range. It allows me to demonstrate another part of the game is you don't have to spend all your action points. On your turn, if you wish, you can always save action points, and at the beginning of next turn, you'll still gather your normal 4 action points, and you'll have any left over. You'll see that the board here actually has up to 8 action points allowed. The last 2, 9 and 10, are if you have the haste special effect. So for instance, Sabine now has 1 action point remaining. At the beginning of next round, she's going to gain 4. She'll have 5 to spend, so she'll be able to do a more powerful turn. We're going to move on to Tango Estelle. Tango Estelle then is going to do her turn. She is a Pyromancer and a Geomancer, and that's going to be able to show you some of the interactions that can happen with elemental effects. So one of the classics of a Divinity game is I'm going to oil up the area and then burn the characters in it. So let's demonstrate how that works. Fossil Strike, in this case, is a 2 action point, 2 cooldown skill that is range 1, so that's perfect range for me. It's connected by 1 area. And it's a single target attack, so I can attack either E or C. Given that our fast minion here has been attacked, we'll attack the same person. So we're going to be rolling 4 white dice plus my star, and it's doing earth damage, which is going to be going against their magical damage, magical resistance, not their physical resistance. Finally, the most important thing here is that once the attack is complete, the target's area gains oily or difficult terrain, but I'm going to choose oily for the sake of this demonstration. So let's do that now. I'm going to cast Fossil Strike, 2 action points, 2 cooldown. Move down the action point track to 2 points, and I'm going to roll my 4 white dice against our Magister Sailor. That is a horrible, horrible roll, which is not wonderful, and it allows me to demonstrate something else. Everyone gets source. As you can probably tell, you've got this little source collar on the left-hand side, and you have a source token on it. You will gain more source as you go. You'll be able to get rid of that collar, which will actually unlock some powerful source abilities near the end, later on in the game. But obviously right now we don't have that. So we have a little trickle of source that we can use. And what source allows you to do is it's essentially dice mitigation. You can re-roll all dice on 1 roll. So for instance, in this roll, I'm going to spend my source, throw it away. I'll get it back in the next round, and I'm going to re-roll all my dice. And that's wonderful. I couldn't have orchestrated this better myself. We've actually done a massive amount of hits there. So we have 6 total hits, plus my star for Fossil Strike, which is 7 earth damage, which goes against the magical resistance of this Magister Sailor, which is 6 damage total. So we're going to reduce their health by 6. And that is bringing us down to 9. So we're on 9 health now with that Magister Sailor. We're really knocking him down. The most important part though is that I now get a oil token, and I place it on the area of which I just attacked. So now this area is oily. So if I was to do another earth attack, it would actually add +2 to those attacks. But where the status effects, the area conditions really matter is how it interacts with the player, right? So in this case, this specific skill, Searing Daggers, directly interacts with oil. So I'll spend my 2 action points, cooldown 2 once again, range 1 single attack, so I'm going to attack C once more. But where the special text comes in, if the target is in an oily area, this is an area attack. So now I'm hitting not just C, but I'm also hitting E. If you roll any specials, the target gains burning. And then finally, after the damage, if the area was oily, we then make it a warm area because everything's burning. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna roll our 3 white dice, but we got 2 hits plus 2 specials. Good news is that means that I do 3 fire damage, but most importantly, because it's in an oily area, it's now an area effect. So this 2 damage also applies to this Magister Sailor, 3 damage, sorry. So I would deduct their health by 3, which brings them down to 19. And then, finally, with specials rolled, the targets, plural, gain burning 1. That allows me to explain pretty much one of the major last things of combat, which is status effects, which are status effects that players or minions can gain. In this case, burning. If an origin was to gain burning, you would keep it in this portrait mode and you would actually put it in your cooldown. So if I got burning 3, I would put it here. However, this is not for an origin. This is for a minion. So in order to keep things simple, because sometimes they can have a little bit of variance in rules, we flip it over to its landscape side, its sideways side, and we put it in the minion tray in 1. And we can always tell where it's meant to go because obviously a portrait one will not fit on this minion tray. And essentially it says the same thing. They remove it if they're in a wet area, they take extra fire damage, and when they're burning every turn, they will take 2 extra health damage as well. So this per Magister Sailor has been thoroughly assaulted. The area is no longer oily, it is now warm thanks to the searing daggers. Tanguistel's turn is done, and that completes our origin round of combat. We would then continue with the Magister Sailor, who would go again. The second Magister Sailor in slow, they would have their turn. Then finally we would go to the top of the round, we would move our location timer down once more, and then we would then gain our action points. So Tanguistel, Sebille would go up. And then finally on your turn, after our fast Magister Sailor has gone again, on your turn you will be processing your cooldowns and be able to use any cards that come off the cooldown slot to take your turn. That is the basics of combat. Once a combat is over, we take the exploration card, the location card that we had for the combat, and we flip it over. So once a combat is done, we flip it over, which is why we keep it in the active combat section, and we read the results. Either we will have a victory, in this case we have, where we loot the remains of the guards and gain 5 gold, or sometimes if you're defeated, the game will actually either you'll get a punishment for failing, you'll lose something, or you'll lose some items or gold or whatever, or in more dramatic circumstances, a defeat might actually make you have to leave the area, or in even more extreme circumstances, might make you need to restart if it's a boss encounter or this type of thing. But in this case we won, we got our 5 gold, I would take the 5 gold. It goes into party funds, because in this case all our money is party funds, and the combat card would go into the discard pile. I would also, by the way, put our storage room card into the discard pile. We move on to the next round. The location timer has moved, so we'll explore again. There's one more thing I wanted to demonstrate, or there's 2 more things I want to demonstrate before we kind of conclude. One is, if we explored the interrogation room here, you're going to see that the location cards offer a lot of choices and decisions that players will have to make. When I'm in a location by myself, I make that decision by myself. If I'm with somebody, we must make it as a team. In this case, Tanguistel is not with Sebille, so we're going to pull the interrogation card and read it. A guard is interrogating a prisoner. It looks very violent. Flip this card. I flip the card and it says, the guard is currently beating the prisoner to within an inch of his life. He may not have long. Do you want to help the prisoner? If you want to help, you draw card A. If you don't, and you just want to watch, you draw card B. And this, importantly, would be a decision that the Sebille character, the Sebille player, would have to make. I will show you both just to demonstrate how the game works. If we draw card A and draw card B, and I'll show you both, you'll see that we can either act the hero or stay in the shadows. Card A is, you rush in to defend a helpless prisoner. Spawn the following enemies. A Magister Guard in slow. We're not going to get into that combat right now to demonstrate that, but just keep in mind that if I did that while somebody else went to the guard station, this Magister Guard would spawn and the 2 Magister Sailors that we just fought, making that whole encounter just ever so tougher because it would have been 3 minions instead of 1. Once again, this is a combat card, so if I won, I would flip it over and I would draw the victory or the defeat rules. If I ignored and decided not to help, it says, you stay in the shadows, and the guard beats the prisoner to death. He cleans his hands with a grimy rag and goes into an adjacent room. Flip this card. I can go in and search the body. I gain 3 gold since he won't be needing it. But depending if you had picked your heroic choice, if you had helped, you defeated the Magister Guard. The victory text when you kill the guard is draw card C. So once again, we would go back into the location deck. We would draw card C, and there's a wounded prisoner on the ground, and I can attempt to heal him. And once again, I get another challenge roll result, where I can essentially try and revive him. If I have a healing potion, I can just use that to automatically succeed. And if I flip it over, if I manage to heal them, not only will they be very thankful that I saved them and I would have acted the hero, but they'll give me a resurrection scroll, and I'll be able to draw that from the consumables, and that will be an item that I'll be able to carry with me for the future adventure. Otherwise, if I was not able to help them but they die, I still get the 3 gold from previous because the guy is dead and I'm still searching his body as before. There are over 50 locations in the game. You will realistically play about 15 of those throughout your entire adventure. So whatever choices you make and the paths you choose to go through, your experience will be very, very different to another players or in other groups, depending on the choices that they make. That's the basics of location exploration and gameplay. There's obviously a lot of nuances that we can dive into further that you'll see as you play. But the most important thing as you learn how to play this game is that most of it, when you start getting into once you know this basics, the game guides you for everything else. If there's ever a special rule that you need to remember, such as multi-card locations, which we haven't really explained yet, or area statuses, or if there's a specific area status that you haven't seen yet or explored much, tactical locations. A bunch of these small, nuanced rules are very easy to understand once you have the grips of play, and the location book itself will list them in the special rules to remind you and teach you how to play as you go. So once you have these basics, you're perfectly ready to continue your adventure and dive in, and you'll only get a much more enriched experience as the game starts to evolve and change with you as you get much more accustomed to these mechanics. Thanks very much for watching. I hope this was useful and very helpful for you. This is where the game is at the moment, and we're really excited to see its conclusion.